Should be ready to go.
Got it. All right. Well, this is Bartlett Durand. I am I don't know what I am, the backup board chair, vice chair, I guess. So we have quorum on our Public Safety Committee tonight, May 2nd, 2022. As I understand it, we have been properly posted this time with the agenda out. So I'd like to call us to order. Chief, you want to lead us in a roll call?
Sure. Tom Yost.
I see a wave.
Yep.
Okay.
Bartlett Durand.
Here.
Emily Kuhn.
Here.
Cornell.
Present.
And Kathleen.
I'm here.
And from the PD staff, we have Captain Kukuski, Captain Geisler, and Office Manager Lynn Endress, who's taking our notes. Hello.
Right. I see no one here for public comment, but just give a moment in case somebody pops in. See no public. All right. We'll just have to move around there. Approval of minutes. And then we'll kick over to full agenda items. I received my copy of this from Lynn. When was that? Last week? I believe I got it on 4/26. Did our committee members get a chance to review the minutes? Or would you like to take a moment to review the minutes? Okay.
I reviewed them. They look okay to me.
Great. I will take that as a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Excellent. Thank you very much. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? I will call that approved. Moving on. Chief, over to you with agenda item 1.
Thanks, Bartlett. Not a whole lot to report on the monthly agency summary. A few things that I'll kind of point out, and I guess that's a good thing that there's not a lot to report, kind of status quo, but there's a few things that I thought I'd just kind of mention. So on the calls for service, this is something that was kind of brought up to me and I got questioned a lot in 2020 is there's, I think, a feeling that law enforcement is doing a lot of self-initiated activity, sometimes looking for reasons to stop people. And I think this is a pretty good indicator of how busy our department is. If you look at our calls for service 911 and citizen generated, many months, that's 2 times the amount of officer initiated calls for service that the police department receives. And you'll see that's pretty consistent. If you look back traditionally, some months it varies, but I thought that was pretty important to point out that a lot of times that we're call driven, that it's 911 calls and citizen generated calls that come into our communication center that we can't ignore, that the department has to respond to. And a lot of those officer initiated calls are traffic stops. A lot of traffic complaints that we get throughout the city that our officers, when they have free time, try to conduct traffic enforcement to slow down traffic, enforce stop sign violations, spend time around the schools. We get a lot of complaints about school traffic, people doing U-turns and stuff like that when they're dropping off their kiddos. So I thought that was just kind of interesting. I wanted to point that out that traditionally it's about 2 times the number of 911 calls and citizen generated calls compared to officer initiated calls for service. And then calls for service overall is we're kind of on track to probably hit that 18,000 mark where we did last year. I still kind of feel like we're a little bit in that COVID hangover, but I think that over the next year or 2, we're going to definitely see our calls for service increase. The city's still growing, a lot of multifamily housing complexes, a lot of growth, and I really think that we're going to see our calls increase over the next couple of years. But kind of that path right now is we're going to be pretty close to where we ended in 2021. And the only other thing that I kind of saw looking at our calls for service, which I think are good statistics, get to the right page, is our motor vehicle thefts. As you can see, are currently in 2022 is at 3 compared to in 2021. We're at 25 for the end of the year, which is good that we're down a little bit. And then also our theft of motor vehicles. Get that to that page. Theft of automobiles is at 8 for 2022, and you can see in 2021, 2020, and 2019, we're in the upper 40s, mid 40s, upper 40s. So that's down a little bit too, which is a good sign. And I'm hoping that trend continues throughout the summer, but we do usually see an uptick of those type of theft from autos and theft of autos during the summer months when there's a little bit more free time for some of the juveniles throughout our communities. But that, I thought those were kind of good numbers. I wanted to point those out, and hopefully that trend will continue throughout the rest of 2022. But those were the only things that kind of stood out when I took a look at this. Haven't had any significant calls for service. An increase of robberies or anything like that, any shootings or anything like that. So that's a good sign. And I just thought I'd point out of some of those kind of positive numbers that we're seeing in our monthly report. Now open up for any questions if anybody has any.
I don't have a question, but I have a comment, because I started looking at the data today, and the first 2 pages are based on the last 6 months, that October through March timeframe, so kind of 2 quarters worth of data, and that is kind of in comparison to what you see later when it goes through kind of by year. And I had to reacclimate, because sometimes when you look at that 6 month, it can actually be, it looks distorted. Like, for instance, like I spent some time looking at just on like calls for service. So on the page you're on right now, when you see like officer initiated, boy, it looks like it's increasing in those 6 months, right? If you just look at the blue line and over. But when you kind of go into some of the details below over a 12-month period, then it looks equal. And I don't know, I think we've been getting it in 6-month chunks, but for some reason, it's not as fulfilling as the 12-month chunks. I think it's more misleading in the 6 month, because as you said, like, we saw more vehicles being stolen in the fall of last year. So, if you take it out of context, some of these details kind of look skewed either too high or too low. So I just want to, it's a comment. I know you asked for questions, so I'm sorry to say this, but just to not be overly misled by just the 6 month period, because so much of what comes further down in the 12-month evaluation is more accurate, I think, to what we're really seeing.
No, that's a great point. And I think I've made this comment to this committee before. This is a monthly summary that's completed by our crime analyst, which we share with 4 other police agencies. So it's easy for him to create one report for all of us instead of trying to create separate agency reports for Middleton and then for Monona and Fitchburg. So I think that's a great point, and that can be misleading, but this is kind of a generic report that he creates for all of us. But yeah, you'd have to look at the whole entire report and looking at how it's broken down to see the true stats. That's a great point, Kathleen.
So, sorry, I'm choking here. The couple of things. One, I'm always struck how reactive we have to be. I mean, that's what you do, right? You see someone or the call comes in, it's all reaction. And is that the point of Tom's position and some of these other community outreach, to try to break out of just reaction mode and be more proactive in community building?
Absolutely, Barla. That's what we're finding, and I've made this comment to this committee before, and feel like I'm a broken record. But as we see the city grow, and it's a great growth, I think I just saw a statistic from Mike Davis that since 2013, the city's grown by over 20%. Yet during the time frame, we've only added 3 police officers. That's a significant growth. And when there's growth, there's calls for service that occur, and that limits our ability to be proactive. Again, we can't, when we're going from call to call, be sitting on Branch Street and running radar because the citizens are upset about traffic there, blowing stop signs or anything like that, when the staff is so busy. So that is the purpose of Tom's position, is doing that community outreach, the proactive things that continue to build those relationships with our community, because the officers are, every year we don't add staff, that lessens. We do not have the ability to do that proactive activity, which is so important and which our community is looking for. But the officers, when they're just trying to find time, 15 minutes to grab lunch and to get the reports done, and before the next call comes in, those proactive activities are going to be the first ones that go away. So yes, that's kind of Tom's main goal, is to connect with the community and build those relationships as the officers are finding it more and more difficult to do so.
Yeah. And then the other point I was going, I'm 54. I don't know why it's taken me so long to figure out what the point of the police is. I mean, it's always like just the reactive, right? Like, oh, they're pulling me over for speeding, or there's like just that, like in Bad Cop, oh, they're coming to, And this weekend I was in Philadelphia, and we had a potentially rabid raccoon get into the house. It was this whole ordeal, and they call for help, and an officer shows up, and it's very much like, nicest guy coming to help, trying to deal with the problem, and deals with it. And it's like, man, it's like the neighborhood handyman. It's just for everything else, right? Don't come fix my door, but fix my life when I can't quite deal. And I don't, this gets back to like when I first joined, Chief, it's like the whole, how do we work on that image where we get to, when people think of Middleton Police, it's officer friendly, first and foremost, coming to make my life better. And I don't have an answer. It's seeing all this and knowing we've got some new officers coming and hopefully get a referendum. It's like, how do we really focus on that positivity around this? Not just Chicago cop, Chicago blues, whatever they call it. What you see on TV. That's what I want to combat.
You make a lot of great points there, Bartlett, and I've said this for many years. Law enforcement has been tasked with a lot of society problems, and that was not the reason for law enforcement. I've changed batteries out of a smoke alarm at 1 a.m. because who else are you going to call when your alarm's going off and beeping? They didn't want to wake up the fire department, but they'll call 911 and they'll call a police officer over to take care of that. And that we've seen repeatedly, and we talked about that with mental health issues. We've talked about a lot of things that have now been tasked to law enforcement that was never intended to be an issue for us. So yeah, you make a lot of great points. I wish I had a great answer for a lot of those things, but we can't ignore it. Somebody's got to deal with those issues. That rabid raccoon, if you didn't get a police officer, I don't know who you would have called. Fire department's not going to take care of it. EMS isn't going to take care of it. Public Works isn't going to take care of it. The police are the only ones that are going to be able to respond and take care of that. But is that really our issue? Probably isn't, but that's where we're at in society.
Yeah. Yeah, it's intriguing to, and like the overwhelming response to Caesar's, is it Caesar or Cesar Salinas? Caesar's, yeah, the first aid he did on that girl. And it's seeing the police as a first responder. Well, I mean, just I go back, I want to figure out, and this has come out, I've spun off this. I want a public relations pitch. I want something. And maybe we get there when we're back with each other and you guys get to be around and meeting people more. And maybe Tom gets to focus on that. But, the more we can get you guys in our community, doing training, just being there in a more social setting, I think is just going to make things better for everybody, including the reactive understanding of all these things. So, all right, I'll step off my soapbox. I just wanted to share those.
No, you're right. I see Tom's got his hand raised.
My turn. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So the theft from auto, that would include auto theft and theft from within inside the vehicle. How about a boat or trailer attached that has been disconnected? Would that also be classified as theft from auto?
So like a boat that was taken attached to a motor vehicle, is that?
Yeah, right. So a boat parked in a parking lot or a slot stall or in the street over by Lake Street. If a boat was stolen that was once attached to an automobile, would that be classified as theft from auto?
No, that's a difference. That's different. Theft from auto is actually somebody going into a vehicle and taking change out or credit cards or a purse. That would be like a boat is actually registered. That'd be a theft of auto, but it'd be a theft of boat, but it'd be classified different than a theft from auto.
So there's theft from auto and there's also theft of auto or theft auto parts. There's only two auto classifications thefts here, right?
Theft auto, theft from auto.
Yeah, theft from auto, there's theft auto parts. So if somebody, the catalytic converters is kind of the big thing now that are being cut off, that would fall underneath the theft.
Oh, okay, I see. So then motor vehicle theft. It's worded differently, so it didn't fall in line. Okay, I see. I'm slow. And then the flat line, like 2 years ago, the unknown flat line, I'm guessing that's due to reclassification, which we talked about earlier.
Yep, you're spot on. Yeah, it's the change of the records management system, how some things didn't come over. They're classified differently, so that's why it flatlined. We'll see that as we move forward, that a lot of those unknowns are completely gone.
Okay.
I just want to add to Bartlett's comments, is that when the bear came through Middleton Beach Road, people called the police. And I only share that because when they told me, I thought, go back into the house.
Yeah.
Not call the police. But I'm still glad that they thought, there's a problem, I'm going to call the police, because at least we got awareness out there. But I'm just sharing that because it was, I've gone to the cabin up north, and the only thing I know about bears is go back inside. You see one, go back inside. So, you know, maybe we do have to do a little bit more outreach, get folks kind of using that noggin, you know, when the things happen. But if you're not used to going up north, maybe you don't see bears. Maybe the best thing to do is call the police when you don't know. So thanks for all that you do.
Yes. Could you come back in about an hour? I can. Okay, thanks.
And I see Tom's got his hand raised again.
Oh, yeah. Well, I don't know if it is appropriate, but we're talking about outreach. And I'm just thinking about how we used to have police like come to our condo board meetings in the summer by the poolside to talk to people. I thought that was a good way to let the public know and to have a dialogue with the public. That's what we're talking about, right? As far as outreach, is having a dialogue with the community. And so we used to do that. We haven't done that in many years that I know of. And I thought that worked really good, and it'd be good if the outreach guy could focus in on the few condos we have in town.
Yeah,
In addition to other neighborhood communities like Middleton Beach Road or whatever.
Yeah, Tom, if we get a request like that, that usually goes to our community awareness officer, Tom Wilson, and then he'll put that on his calendar. I can't think of too many requests that we get that we don't try to fulfill. But I don't think we've got a request from your condo association for a number of years. And in fact, I think I was there once to present to your association, but that was many, many years ago. The bad thing about, especially a lot of the association meetings are in the PM hours, and that is usually our busiest time period. So we really struggle to get our patrol officers there, or we'll make a commitment, but they have to break because of another call. So that again would be a town.
But maybe we did request it. I assumed that that you guys reached out to us and asked if we would be interested in listening to you or whatever.
Oh.
But maybe I had it all wrong.
You know, I would like, let's go ahead and mark this for agenda item. We've had enough discussion, and I certainly led the charge. For next meeting, could we put on the agenda just community outreach? Now that we've got new officers, we have 3 officers who are out of probation, and we have Tom going back to his full-time or his focused position. Maybe, and with the referendum coming up, maybe we talk about this at our next meeting and figure out what can we encourage a plan to go out and, I mean, put something in the paper if you want us to come talk to you, or do it by neighborhoods or something. But I think it'd be a good use of time to talk about that.
Absolutely. I'll put it on the agenda, and we don't need to keep rehashing this, but we even put stuff out on our Facebook page and our social media pages about doing business talk. So we do try to communicate that to our community, that if you want an officer to come in about safety or active shooter events, anything like that, that we're willing to do that. But yeah, we can talk about that further at our next meeting.
That's great. Because we're coming out of COVID. People are people again. All right. Well, let's move along. Thanks, guys, for the discussion and humoring me in my discussion. Where are we going? Complaints. Where are we on complaints? Did I see complaints? No, I got my next thing is cars.
Nope, Barley, you're right. We're on to complaints. Sorry, I was muted and trying to share my screen. I will turn it over to Captain Kukuski, who will talk about the complaints in the last quarter.
All right, thank you. So I added a little thing at the top here, just from previous meetings. It's called a data snapshot, just kind of give you an idea, kind of put things into perspective, how many complaints we've had. In this quarter, there's only 2 complaints that I'm going to be discussing. So that's 2 complaints out of over 3,300 calls since our last meeting. So it really puts into perspective how few complaints we've gotten. And this is the lowest number we've had in quite some time. So, which is a good thing. Hopefully that's helpful to put that in perspective. The first one there came in back in January. This was a procedural complaint by a female that we had contact with. We were called to a residence after she was sitting in the driveway, refusing to leave the property. This is the residence of her ex-boyfriend. So she was refusing to leave. He called the police. We showed up and moved her along. It was really a non-event. There was no citations issued. But later the complaint was filed, and this woman alleged that the officers told the complainant that the female was issued a citation when she wasn't, or that she was going to be issued a citation. So this made a stressful situation for her, and didn't think it was right. So the supervisor looked into it, watched the entire length of the body camera, and both officers that responded, and there was no evidence that no officer ever said she's going to be issued a citation. At one point, the officer even told her that she's not in trouble and she's free to leave. So I'm not really sure where she got that from. And ever since the incident, we have not had contact with her about this complaint. So it was closed as unfounded, and she did not return the form. The second one came to our attention back in February 13th. This was an alleged conduct incident by a male subject who also did not return the complaint form. He alleged he was arrested for a violation of a harassment injunction, and he was upset after the fact that he thought the officer was threatening and intimidating because while talking to the suspect on the phone, he asked the suspect if he could come to the police department so he could be booked and released. And he also told him that his lawyer could not be present during that process. So when we have someone who's facing criminal charges, we have a couple different avenues we can take. But most traditionally, if it's a serious situation, you are taken to jail. There's some cases that are mandatory arrests where we don't have any discretion. And there's other situations where we have the discretion to issue a citation, or maybe even do a warning, or in some cases we can do this book and release scenario. So this is a pretty, it's much less invasive than actually taking someone to jail. And a violation of a harassment injunction is actually a mandatory arrest. So the way the officer satisfied that was to quote unquote arrest him, process him at the police department, give him a court date, and send him on his way. So that's what he did. And the reviewing supervisor felt that that was far less intrusive than actually taking someone to jail. So didn't find that anything with that approach was intimidating at all. And as far as not having a lawyer present, that's actually not something that's permitted back in our arrest processing room. That's usually a very efficient process of you brought back there, we take your fingerprints, you're photographed, you're not interviewed, and you are either taken to jail or just released. So it wasn't like he was being denied an attorney during an interview or something like that. So that element was also unfounded. The second aspect of the complaint, if you want to scroll down there, was that there was a conflict of interest because the officer knew the victim previously, that they had actually gone to, I think it was like grade school or maybe even middle school together, and that he felt like the officer favored the victim because of that, which there was no evidence found of that. This is a pretty cut and dry situation. There's an allegation that he violated this harassment injunction by sending her messages by phone, I believe, if I remember right. So it's not like the officer's going out and digging things up. This is, he was produced or put the evidence in front of him. It was a clear violation of the order, so he made the decision to book and release him. So the supervisor did confirm that the victim did know the officer. since 6th grade, but they don't have any contact anymore and haven't had contact for 15 years. There's no evidence of any conflict of interest. And again, as I kind of put in there, that there's nothing subjective about that particular charge. It's the evidence is pretty clear cut, and the district attorney's office did prosecute it. They didn't see any issue with that. So we kind of look at it like if you're from the Madison area, you're occasionally going to run into people that you know. So to just have a policy that you can't ever have any dealings with someone that you were an acquaintance with at some point in your life, it's not really practical. But in this particular case, we did, tell the officer that if this becomes a continued issue, maybe the next time we'll have someone else handle the case, just to avoid any perception of favoritism. But none was found, and that one was closed as unfounded. So again, just the 2 complaints in the last several months, and there's actually not even any complaints currently pending, knock on wood. So it's kind of, I don't want to say the Q word, but things are going well, and hopefully that continues. Any questions on any of those that I've talked about?
I see, Tom, I don't know if your hand's up from before. If that's
Oh, no, I must have failed.
okay. Emily, I see you had your hands up.
Yeah, just as an FYI, I used to talk to my staff about acquaintances versus friends. We have some language. So if you probably have a policy, but if you do not have said policy, we have that same issue when we work in federal service. And so we even go down to what if you go to church and you see this person every Sunday, and that kind of acquaintance versus going to their house afterwards, that would be a friend. But if you say hi to Miss Smith, walking at the grocery store or something, that is an acquaintance. You can still serve them. But if you're going to her house afterwards, after church, that is a friend. So there's like those little lines that if you haven't had that conversation and never want to do a dry run, I can do it from recall. So just holler at me.
Yeah, that's a great point and a good way to look at it. It's something we do talk to our staff about. We do have some policies on it, and we try to, even like with this complaint, even if there's a perception of favoritism, we'll even take steps to avoid it, even if there's no substance to it. But yeah.
Well, props to you for that. That shows that concern and consideration. So thanks for what you do.
Thank you.
How many of our officers live in Middleton where we'd have this as an issue?
I don't even know.
Not many.
Sorry, Travis, I'll just hop in here quick. I don't even know if that's as much of an issue. There's a lot of us who have coached youth sports. You'll run into parents that way. We have relatives that live here. So it's not even about living in the community. It's just having the connections. But I recall a case when I was working patrol. My sister-in-law was in an accident at Century in the old Highway 12. And I was one of the first officers that was actually in my beat. And right when I arrived on scene, I asked one of the other responding officers, saying, "This is a relative. I don't want to handle it. I don't know who's at fault. Can you take the accident for me?" So we're really good at that, of making sure that there is not that conflict, and we have enough officers working that there's probably somebody there that doesn't know that individual, even if another officer does. So we really don't encounter that much. Probably more of a perception, like the complaint that Travis just talked about. But if the officers know that if they feel like there's going to be a conflict of interest, that they need to contact the supervisor, and another officer will be assigned. Sorry, Travis, didn't mean to interrupt you.
Nope, you covered it.
Cool. Any other questions? All right. Thank you very much for that. That's nice. Always nice seeing the thoroughness, no matter how cut and dried it may seem. Use of force. Oh, and I don't know, do bolos get to count as use of force going forward? I'm very excited by that, Chief.
That will be part of our review. That does fall on our use of force, policy. So yes, if there's use of any bolo in the future, that will be listed here. And Captain Geyser,
can't wait for our first one.
Captain Geyser, I'll turn it over to you.
All right. So for this period of time, there was 10 incidents that we'll review here. I figured there's actually probably one of our most significant periods of time where we've had some pretty significant uses of force. And I've tried to add some additional details as far as the reasoning for the use of force, just to kind of hit home how difficult it is for even multiple officers to get a person into custody. So the first one there is just a taser pointed, and that one, the subject had actually called twice. So this is the second time he called. He's an alcoholic, and he just wanted to get some treatment. And I guess it shows how the system doesn't always work, the mental health and the alcohol treatment system, that is. So we got the call about he wanted to hurt somebody. He just wanted a reason to go to jail. So our officer got on scene. And he did a good job of trying to de-escalate and talking to this man. But then, as you can see, his quote there, and the reason for the use of force is, "Do I gotta effing punch you in the face to get me in that car?" And then he started walking towards our officer. So our officer drew his taser, called for backup immediately, and he got back up there pretty quickly and was able to de-escalate that situation, get the subject into custody once the backup arrived. So it's a display of force. Again, I think we go kind of above and beyond what a lot of departments do as far as even reporting a display of force, such as pointing a taser at somebody. We didn't fire the barbs at them, but it is clearly not a normal day for most people to have a taser pointed at them, and it's a pretty big deal. So we are documenting those. And again, the second one there is just an off-leash canine deployment. So that means our canine was released into a building. The handler took him off the leash to just go search an area. So there might be somebody in there we didn't know. And that's a residential alarm. And I know I have a bunch of abbreviations, so I'm going to try and go over those so it makes a little more sense to you, but it just kind of makes a pretty messy spreadsheet a little cleaner. So AOA is an assist other agency, and DCSO is Dane County Sheriff's Office. So we actually got a call to assist Dane County Sheriff's Office at an alarm just outside of our city, and our canine officer deployed there. There was nobody inside the house, so it wasn't a use of force. Again, most departments probably wouldn't even acknowledge that existed. It's just a thing. It was on a call, and they may or may not even do a report. But we are going, I guess, a little bit above and beyond, and including those. That next incident, our special response team, SRT, it's teamed up with Sun Prairie and Fitchburg. We actually served a warrant in the city of Middleton here for the Madison Police Department. They were investigating a shooting. So this was not necessarily believed to be the target of that shooting, but a person affiliated with it. So they went in, and you hear a lot about the no-knock warrants, the knock and announce warrants. We don't do no-knock warrants. We do not serve them, our special response team. If it were to that level, it would be a Dane County SWAT team response. So the law says you have to give a person a reasonable amount of time to come and answer the door. This is at a pretty small apartment, probably no more than 700 square feet. So they knocked and announced for 45 seconds. They got no answer, and then they forced entry there. They actually did find a woman hiding in a closet under a pile of clothes, which is always kind of a holy cow situation when they're going in. So she did have some weapons pointed at her, and then she was taken into custody without incident there. So the next one was actually a pretty significant use of force where there's a domestic disturbance in the South District with a subject that's actually from another country. He physically assaulted our caller and then said he was going to kill her. Our officers got on scene, made contact with that subject, and he immediately resisted. Says he was decentralized. That means he was taken to the ground. So our one officer was there by herself at the beginning. And then the second officer luckily got there pretty quickly. He was fighting. A third officer showed up. This is on third shift. And they were able to take him down to the ground. This one I don't actually have oh no, I do. So they fought with him for about 3 minutes before they were able to get him into custody. And he was violently fighting. He actually bit one of our officers on her knee. Luckily, she was not significantly injured. When he was taken into custody, he was then taken into the squad car where he started banging his head against the cage. He spit on one of the medics who we brought in to take a look at him, and then actually tried spitting on our officers as well. That one did go to a critical incident review board as per policy. If an officer is injured, we have to do a review of those. And that was found, the use of force was found to be within policy. In fact, the people who sat on that said that these officers could have justifiably gone a level higher, could have used a taser, they could have started striking, knee strikes, punches to take this subject into custody, but they did not, and they were able to get him into custody. He was taken to the jail. A little bit of follow-up on that one, the same subject and the same victim, another significant domestic where we were involved, but it was after the fact. That person the same subject actually beat that female so significantly that she had to go to the hospital. So UW hospital, or at a UW police department, dealt with that initial call, and he ended up fighting with them as well. He was taken to jail, and we found out he's actually from Belgium. By way of somewhere in Central America. He fled the country after he was released from jail. The next one was an assist other agency for Dane County Sheriff's Office. Again, there was a pursuit that came into the city that ended up stopping actually over by the vet clinic right behind the police department. Our officers were not involved in the pursuit, but were involved, will assist with taking somebody into custody if they do stop. So that was a point of a firearm and a high-risk stop. That's standard. If there's we call it either a felony stop, high-risk stop. So a pretty significant incident. We don't know why this person's fleeing, and they were taken into custody without incident. The firearm was pointed, and they were decentralized or taken down to the ground, mostly by the sheriff's department there. But we had one officer assist. The next one is actually probably the most significant incident that we were involved in, and it dealt with what we ended up finding out was most likely a mental health situation. So a homeless gentleman came, and if you see the NPA there, that means no permanent address. So under the subject's address there. So we refer to it as NPA. So he went to a local hotel on Deming Way, tried to check in. They said, we don't have any rooms. I'm sorry. And mind you, this is in late February. It was actually snowing that night. That subject tried to rent a room. They said there were none available. When he was told that, then he decided he wasn't going to leave. And then he went into a hot tub, actually, with all of his clothes on. I'm talking winter jacket, everything. We sent a couple officers there, and it was looking mostly like and it says ED, MH, drug issues. So ED is an emergency detention or a mental health hold. Chapter 51 is what people frequently call it. Those are pretty time-consuming calls there. The officers, I watched the body cam, did a good job of trying to de-escalate. Basically, everybody left the pool area. This gentleman went from the hot tub into the pool, fully clothed. At a certain point, he got out of the pool and just decided that he was going to take all of his clothes off, and I mean, completely naked. The officers still didn't want to physically confront him. And then he walked out in the lobby. The officers tried to stop him, but he walked past, and they didn't want to make a scene there. And he walked out into the parking lot where he started doing exercises. He actually, on 2 occasions, laid flat in the snow, scooped snow, and like it was snorting snow. The officers obviously recognize this as a pretty significant issue, either being drug, alcohol, or mental health related. Something the officers recognized what we call excited delirium. Frequently, when body temperatures get very high due to any number of issues, again, that could be drug or mental health related, they start to focus on reflective surfaces. In this circumstance, this gentleman went up to a car that was parked under the overhang, punched it twice as hard as he could. And then the officers they had already called for an ambulance. They called for additional backup before they wanted to go hands-on with him. He pulled away from them. Again, they were going to wait, but then he started clenching his fist, giving what we call the 1,000-yard stare, where something's about to happen. So one of our officers pulled out his taser, pointed at him, told him to get down. He refused. He actually lunged at the officer. The officer fired the taser. Didn't have the desired effect the first time. The gentleman got back up, or he actually never went all the way down. He was still upright, and then he charged the second officer that was off to his right. Our first officer tased the subject again, and then the fight was on. He went down to the ground that time, and I shows you here. So they went 2.5 minutes. It took 3 officers to get that guy into custody, and he was in shape. He was wet. He didn't have any clothes on. As you can imagine, that's not a very easy person to get into custody there. So Pretty significant use of force. That subject he didn't claim an injury, but he did have some probe marks. So we ended up, that was a significant use of force. We did a review board on that, and they were found to be within policy there as well. But again, that was probably the most significant one. Last year we didn't have a single taser deployment for the whole year. This one, he was actually tased twice with the probes, and then there were, if you look over on the note, the drive stun. So that's what it's called when they actually take the taser and you can finish the connection by pushing it onto their body. So the probes in one area, and then they complete the circuit by pushing the taser onto the person's body. That was relatively effective, but not as effective as we had hoped. The next one on there is a report of a possible intoxicated person at Quick Trip. And this was another pretty significant, I guess, fight you'd call it. So possibly intoxicated driver at a Quick Trip. It was called in. They got the license plate. Our officers run the license plate, find out where this person lives, start heading that way, and they see this driver and actually observed a swerving kind of on the street that he lived on or just adjacent to. So the officer made the traffic stop, or tried to make traffic stop. He lived on a court. He pulled right onto the court, got out of his car, walked up to his house. Our officer was trying to call out to him. The guy was refusing to listen. Our officer makes contact with him at the door of his residence. He's showing obvious signs of intoxication, wouldn't listen to the officer. So the officer just kind of put him in what we call the escort hold, which is just kind of grabbing an arm at the wrist and above the elbow, so they can try to kind of escort them to where they want to go while he was waiting for backup. The subject then started to resist, and this was a very large man. I think they ended up having 5 or 6 officers that were on scene at some point, including Dane County Sheriff's Office. I think Short Hills might have pulled up on that one, but they were having significant trouble getting him into custody, and he ended up over 3 officers. It took literally 5 minutes from the initial point of contact, physical contact with the subject, until he was handcuffed. And again, that was due to his size. The next one was a report of a disturbance. And this was a third party that called in at an apartment complex, sounded like a male and female physically fighting. When the officers arrived on scene, they couldn't find the location immediately. So they started walking through the entire building. They heard yelling and banging in an apartment, and they knocked on the door, and they actually opened, and there's a man, and this is now late February. He's sweating profusely, wearing only boxers. This is another situation where they believe that could be excited delirium. He was talking very rapidly, didn't really make sense. He was actually speaking in the third person. There was a female inside the apartment, but our officers are still standing in the hallway. They can't really see in. The subject appeared to kind of lunge towards the female. And our officers one drew his firearm initially, and then switched to a taser, and actually 2 others ended up pointing a taser. He was taken down to the ground. Actually, he followed commands, went down to the ground, and they were able to take him into custody, but they were on scene for, I think it was 27 minutes thereabouts, where our medics had to be called in and actually give him a sedative that didn't work exceptionally well immediately. So it took quite a while to get him calmed down enough to transport him to the emergency department. And yeah, the next one is a report of, I guess it's an ex that tried to reconcile at like 3 o'clock in the morning after going to the bar. They thought this is actually on a 2nd floor balcony at an apartment complex. So the caller was quite scared, heard glass breaking, thought the person was breaking into the patio door there. Officers got there, found the subject on the 2nd floor, actually hitting the door. What he did, found out after the fact, was that he broke the light, or the glass around the porch light. So our officer covered the subject with his handgun and the guy did thankfully comply. And then an officer went up into the apartment, took the subject into custody without incident. Turned out they did not reconcile that night anyway. He was charged with disorderly conduct and criminal damage to property, is what the CDTP is. And one of our most interesting ones, that last one there, was actually at Cromrie Middle School. We got a report of a burglary alarm at 2:08 a.m. Our dispatchers have access to the school district cameras. While our officers were en route there, the dispatch was looking at the cameras, saw a person wearing all black, and I mean head to toe, full mask, head to toe in black, and our officers encountered a 17-year-old high school kid who thought it would be cool to record some videos for social media. So they came around a corner and encountered the guy in black head to toe and held him at gunpoint until he was taken into custody. That kid actually ended up having a lock-picking set on him, and he had tried to enter. He couldn't actually use the lock-picking set. So he climbed up onto the roof and found an open hatch and went down from the roof into the building there. So he was released to a parent later that night. So some interesting calls over that period of time since we've last met here.
Thanks, Captain. So you had two where you had either mental health or drug overdose or something you weren't sure of, and those get scary because they don't even react right.
Yep.
Do you get follow-up? Do you like have a debriefing and go, it turns out this guy was on X, or what happens? What's the...
That's a good question, Bartlett. Even our own medics can't provide us HIPAA protected information. Because we'll sometimes ask for follow-up and they say, I can't tell you. So no, we don't usually get that feedback. In the circumstance with the one where he was naked and we tased him, correct me if I'm wrong, Travis, he ended up going on a emergency detention, correct?
I believe he did, yes.
Yeah, so that one did turn into a mental health call. And that's, when the officers had been dealing with it, they were on scene somewhere in the area 25-30 minutes before this escalated to the point, and they were contacting family members trying to find someone to release him to come and deal with him. Families saying he was probably undiagnosed schizophrenic, unmedicated. So pretty significant there. The one that I told you about, the apartment complex where he had to be actually give him some meds, that was most likely based on the information that the female provided. That was probably drug related. But yeah, we never really get the results of blood or any treatments.
The other part of our neighborhood office.
Go ahead.
The other part of our neighborhood officer program, as far as treating those with mental health, is trying to identify those who could be dangerous. So this is, a situation where if there's repeat incidents with the same person, we would target them for, an officer to make contact and build that rapport and try to get out ahead of some of these things.
Okay, cool. I would like to put out a general public service announcement to all males who've been in a breakup. Don't get drunk and break into your girlfriend's house thinking you're going to win her back. Okay.
I think you learned that lesson that night. Hopefully.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Just real quick, as far as statistics, I know Trav put the numbers on. It's a little bit more difficult. We do quarterly reviews of all of our use of force. So it ended on, the 31st of March. But we were right in almost exactly as where we've been the last 4 quarters for percentage of incidents. There was over 4,000 incidents. We had about 0.23 to 0.26 is what we're averaging % of all calls results in a use of force. So despite these being pretty significant, they're not necessarily out of the norm.
And I would just like to add, it's, we see in the news a lot the bad use of force incidents, but I mean, you can see that kudos to my staff and to the training and to law enforcement in general. This is what law enforcement deals with on a regular basis. And officers being spit on, being bit, and traditionally what we've seen is the officers are always leaning towards a lesser use of force than what they're justified in using. And you heard that a couple of times from Captain Geisler. I'm amazed at our staff and how they handle some of these situations. Somebody naked, punching windows, swimming in a pool, fully clothed. I mean, these are challenging calls that rapidly change within seconds, and the officers have to make really tough decisions. And not only for the individual, but for themselves and other witnesses. The hotel, there's other people there. I just want to put that plug in there that, again, we see in the news all the bad use of force incidents, but this is what law enforcement deals with on a regular basis. And we never hear about the good cases. We only hear about the bad ones, but they're challenging, as you heard the summary of all these cases. They're challenging cases that our departments and officers deal with on a regular basis.
All right, well, with no other questions or comments, let's move along from what, Middleton Blues into I don't know, cars.
And stand by as I try to find the agenda again. I apologize.
We're on the citywide vehicle replacement plan.
Does everybody have a copy of the packet? Do I need to pull it up, or does everybody see it?
I've got mine. I could share mine if you need me to.
I had it. I just don't know where it went. Just give me a second, Bartlett, as I
On
try to
page
find it.
17, if you have that packet, but
While you're looking for that, I'll share a fun thing to piggyback on Bartlett's PSA on the boyfriends should learn when they become ex-boyfriends not to break in. Well, I'm just going to gender balance that, ladies. Same thing. If you're now an ex-girlfriend, please don't break in. Is that pretty good, Bartlett? Yeah. Okay. That's all I got.
I believe I have the agenda back up. Does everybody see it?
yep, we're there.
All right. So the next agenda item has to do with a vehicle replacement plan. If you kind of follow the budget, and Emily, jump in here if I misstate anything. The budget process last year, kind of a last minute push by the Sustainability Committee, is to kind of halt all vehicle purchases in 2022. And that was to push the city towards a sustainability goal, becoming using more electric and hybrid vehicles. It was kind of a late 11th hour. The council decided to pursue and to go forth with what was in the budget, but did ask the city administrator, the city's lead mechanic, and a few others at Public Works who develop this plan every year for a vehicle replacement plan to sit down to look at citywide what we could look to obtain in the future for vehicles for, again, reaching that city sustainability goal. So what you see in front of you is what our lead mechanic, who puts the vehicle replacement plan together every year for the budget, put together for the police department. And if you followed again the budget, you'd probably hear some comments that that the police department should be looking to buy Chevy Bolts or Teslas. I think those are great comments, but those vehicles were never made to be police vehicles. Those departments who have purchased Teslas, there's Madison Police Department purchased 2 Teslas to try them out. They're not being used in patrol in the detective world. In fact, I think one was provided to the chief because they couldn't figure out how to wire it and how it would work for patrol use. I'm all for going towards a hybrid or electric vehicle, but we need the infrastructure for electric vehicles. And currently the only hybrid option for law enforcement is a Ford Interceptor, the SUV model, which is similar to the gasoline vehicles that we drive now. But they're relatively new. They've been out a couple of years. According to our lead mechanic, he didn't want to be the first one to kind of be the guinea pig of seeing what the issues are. They've been out for a few years. He's feeling comfortable that we can go in that direction. So we are actually buying 2 hybrid vehicles for this year. One is an admin vehicle and one is for our patrol fleet. We're going to test it out to see if it's a cost savings, because all these hybrid vehicles cost about $4,000 to $5,000 more than a gasoline vehicle. There's some concerns with city driving that we won't see that savings in gasoline, but we are again willing to try it out to see if we will see that savings with these 2 hybrid vehicles in the near future. Again, not opposed to electric vehicles. There's nothing out there currently. And the other issue with us going with electric vehicles is the city does not have any infrastructure in place yet. And that is currently being looked at the police department and at Public Works to see if we can get some of that installed. So when the electric vehicles are to a point where we think that they can work for law enforcement, that we'd be ready to purchase electric vehicles and charge them appropriately. So I was asked to provide this document to all of you as the Public Safety Committee members to take a look at it and kind of endorse this document or to provide any feedback. This is again what the lead mechanic came up with for the police department. So you can see that there is an electric option for our court officer, where we think that would be a vehicle that could definitely work as an electric vehicle when we have the infrastructure in place. And then you can see all the patrol vehicles. Currently, hybrid is the only option that our lead mechanic and myself feel comfortable with. Not to say that that couldn't change in the next couple of years, but currently a hybrid option Ford SUV is probably the only option that would work for our needs currently. As we go down the document, you can see that there's some admin cars that we think could possibly be an electric option in the future, again, depending on the infrastructure at the police department, and a few other hybrid vehicles. The other electric option in the future is replacing our motorcycle. Harley now makes a new vehicle that is electric, and that's something that we can look at in the future when we need to replace the motorcycle. So that's kind of a real quick summary of the vehicle replacement plan and kind of where we're going as a police department, as a city, to meet the sustainability goals. I'm looking for some feedback, any comments. Emily, if I missed anything, feel free to interject and provide some more details.
You did great.
Do you guys hot swap the cars, or does every officer have a unique vehicle?
Hot swap, like multiple officers are in vehicles? Is that what you're
No,
asking?
like I'm coming in with car 23, or what, I can't remember what one it was from the show. Anyway, car 23 comes in, high five, all right, it's all yours. They jump in 23, they go out on their patrol, and I do my paperwork and go home.
I see what you're asking. Some vehicles are like that, so we try to spread out the use of our vehicles so the same car is not being used 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So we have 10 marked vehicles, and that some days every single car is being used with our school resource officers, Tom Wilson going out to events, our patrol officers. There's days that the cars are constantly being run, and then there's days maybe on the weekends when we don't have as many staff working, where only 4 cars are being run on a pretty continuous basis. In the past, we used to do that. You'd hand the keys off at shift change, and then the next officer would take it out, and we use 4 constant vehicles. And then the wear and tear, we're replacing those cars within a couple of years because they were over 100,000 miles. The seats were worn. There was a lot of mechanical issues. Our lead mechanic has done a fantastic job of developing a plan for the police department. So we have vehicles that are up and running. We don't have cars down for an extended period of time because we can't have that. And like I said, there's days that every single car in our fleet and our patrol fleet is out of the garage and being used in some fashion. So in some cases we do that, Bartlett, but I think we've gotten to the point where the cars aren't being run 24/7, 7 days a week anymore.
And then how many miles do you guys put on the car in a day? And I know it's going to be all over the map, but is there a maximum range short of going off to where we used to go off north, wherever it was for the mental health stuff?
It really depends, because an officer could be tied up on a domestic for 6 hours and they only put 5 miles on the squad car that day to the call and then back to the police department and doing their paperwork. Or it might be a day where they're doing a lot of proactive activity. There isn't a lot of calls for service, but they're doing proactive. They're driving through the neighborhoods, they're doing some traffic enforcement, and they'll put on 50 miles, or they go to Winnebago because of a mental health run, and it is hundreds of miles. So it really varies. I don't think there's an average I could put on that every day.
Well, I mean, because I'm dealing with the city and this kind of stuff. It's like, if we're 100 miles or less in a standard patrol, then, the electric becomes much greater option in a lot of these situations, especially if you have a couple, like farmers, you got a couple diesels or hybrids you can throw in there when you need the long haul. Just thinking of it that way. But, Ford, I think we're 2 years out, for Ford starts unrolling all their electrics. So I think trying to do hybrid is just a half step between now and then. But, people get freaked out by the electric, myself included, and what do they call it? The range, not range NB, range. Anyway, concern about range phobia, maybe it is. But, they run a long time and do really well. And the maintenance seems to be, from the people I know with electrics, maintenance seems to be really good. So I think it'd be something to keep pushing towards. I think it's going to be a good thing.
Absolutely. And I think I heard a little bit, some rumors that the police department was opposed to going to electric vehicles or hybrid vehicles. That is completely false. We're all for it, but I got to have vehicles that are up and running, because if I have an electric vehicle that is breaking down every night on third shift and we have to have it towed, that vehicle is not going to be operated by our patrol staff because they don't feel confident in that vehicle. So I think you're right, Bartlett. We're 1 or 2 years away. It's coming. And as I've told a few others when I've had this conversation about this very topic, is the police department's all for it, but Give it a couple years. I don't think we're quite there yet, but it's coming. And the other thing is the cost. So to get a tier 3 charger for the police department, which means the vehicle can be charged in a couple minutes. When you talked about that quick swap of the squad cars, there are times that an officer pulls into the garage and the next shift takes that car. That car needs to be charged pretty quickly. And I'm told a tier 3 charger, which we need at the police department for a very quick charge, is about $80,000. So it's a significant cost for infrastructure for the needs that we have. I believe in the future they'll come down as this becomes more popular and there's more vehicles. But again, we're all for it. It's just making sure that we are doing it at the right time and we're purchasing vehicles that are going to work for our needs.
Yeah, and I'm glad you're talking about those infrastructure costs in actual dollars. This is Emily, in case y'all only hear a voice, because it is something we have to think about. We often don't have enough money to do the things we need to do. And so if we are switching to doing the infrastructure, which is very important, there are fights every year at budget time. And so, you know, other things will have to be cut and the council has to get real if we're going to commit to doing this right. And the next thing that I want to say is that last year when we were talking about it in council, I made a suggestion that we start with more of the administrative cars. So I'm glad that the police are looking at those. I was actually thinking, you know, for the city staff, like the ones who are just going out and checking on, say, like you know, like the parks or the road, they're doing an inspection real quick, or they're driving out to, you know, sometimes my constituents have concerns about a tree that is falling, or, you know, a pothole that's out of place. Like someone who's just driving out to check on something, that might be a good first kind of few electric cars. So I feel we going slowly, getting some out there, and then having everyone else hear about it. You know, the next year, like, hey, it worked great every day. I would get in it and it was fine. Or that, you know, we all get to see it in person with the quick charge. You know, is it really a 3-minute charge, or do they sell it as 3 minutes and it's really 35? Well, again, for the police, we will need that 3-minute charge. So hopefully we will think through these things and we will provide well in council level.
And Bartlett, I see Kathleen's got her hand up.
I just have two quick questions. The first is, I know you introduced this by saying that there was some sort of kind of something given at the 11th hour that you had to satisfy from the sustainability committee. Is this true? Did they give a mandate? Was there some sort of like, this is what we want kind of thing, and then this is the police department's response to that?
A good question. So we actually have been talking about hybrid vehicles for a couple of years. It was something that we've been talking with our lead mechanic, and we were trying to find the right time. He's been monitoring other departments that have purchased hybrid vehicles. The first year there was a lot of issues. We were told that the hybrid vehicles were down more than they were out on the road. And our lead mechanic, who again does a fantastic job, says never buy a brand new model of any change, because they're going to work out all the bugs that year. So that's why we're holding off. Some of those issues have been taken care of. He feels more comfortable going with the hybrid vehicles. So we are looking to purchase them no matter what this year. But then the sustainability committee the directive was hold off on purchasing any vehicles until we can look at every vehicle that's looking to be purchased in 2022 and seeing if there's other electric or hybrid models that can be used. So from that conversation, I believe the council said we will take a look at it, and we want our lead mechanic to go through every vehicle, every department, to see what could be an electric vehicle or hybrid in the future. So a little bit of a directive, but I think it was also, this is the plan for the police department, what we think will work in the future, but all city departments. If we look at the entire Excel spreadsheet, every city department that has a vehicle in their fleet has some type of plan like this. Did I answer your question, Kathleen?
Yeah, no, thank you. I just wanted to get kind of a bit more information about the context to how this came to be. And then my second question is, I think, a little bit more simple, but the life cycle column on this document seems small for some of these Ford utility, the interceptors, 4 and 5 years. Is that a surprise? You know, when I'm looking at the Chevy Malibu, giving you 14 years.
Yeah, that's
is that probably recommendation, or how are you interpreting that? Because it's obviously, if it's shorter and you're spending more, the offset there concerns me a bit, I think, for cost.
great observation. That life cycle, so for that 14 years for our court officer, that vehicle does not get used on a regular basis. In fact, we've talked about replacing that for probably the last 5 or 6 years, but it's low mileage and it's very little maintenance. So he continues to push that down the road, saying we don't need to replace that yet. But it's getting to the point where it does need to be replaced after 14 years. For our patrol vehicles, that 4 or 5 year mark is where we start to see issues. That's how long, based on the wear and tear. And our mechanic says that's kind of the life cycle where he wants to start getting rid of them. Otherwise, they're down in the shop more than they're out on the road. It used to be 3 years. And with the advancement in technology in the last 3 or 4 years, we bumped that up to 4 or 5 years. And it's kind of a rolling thing. He'll take a look at a squad. So let's say a squad was down for 3 months for some warranty work and it didn't get a lot of mileage on it. He might bump that back, even though it was going to be replaced this year. So it might go for a 5th year instead of a 4th year. But 4 or 5 years is probably our average for a patrol vehicle before we start to see some pretty significant mechanical issues.
Thank you.
Any other questions on this document? Any concerns, comments? What the plan is that this will be presented to the council tomorrow night, that all the different committees have taken a look at it, that they support this plan, or if there's any concerns that you want me to pass on to Mike Davis, I can definitely do that too.
I'm just going to jump in real quick. My ask to the council when he talked about the ultimatum of no purchases was I asked for a 5-year plan from the mechanic, because if I remember correctly, we didn't have any no electric, and I don't believe we had any hybrid. Was okay. So to date, and so I said, this is somewhere we should be moving. But can we make a plan for 5 years, whether that benchmark is say like 40% of the fleet or 60% of the fleet will be one or the other in 5 years, or if you're getting towards 80%. So I'm excited to see, because I saw lots of color options. Obviously for the police, maybe not as much of their fleet, but I'm assuming that, oh no, I actually did look at the full document. A lot of the other departments are not responding to emergencies. So they can go more towards that 60-80% fleet. So overall, the city will be getting towards a more green thing. And then the police, as they are saying, at that 5-10 year mark, they might be able to go because the technology will be there. Did I do okay, Chief? Is that good? Okay.
Perfect. Thank you.
So do you need anything formal from us, or is it just you presented it to us and looking for comments, but then we just roll off?
I think that's a great question, Bartlett. I guess there could be a vote from the committee of whether they endorse this document and it can go forth to the council. I guess I'd leave it up to committee members, or if they just want to, if all of you want to just tell me it looks good and proceed forward, I guess I'll leave it up to you as the chair.
See, this is, I just don't have enough information to say anything other than electric is cool, and I get everybody's nervous stepping forward and all that. So I'm not comfortable making a vote or a formal recommendation myself. I just want to hear from other folks. Cornell, you've been really quiet. You watching a movie over there or what?
Oh no, I actually have it. I have it up on my big monitor over here, so I'm looking at that. No, I went on the bus tour this weekend, and I thought looking at this document, it was interesting because if I remember right, I think they made a comment that we may not actually have that many electric charging locations in Middleton, period. So if we was to upgrade the fleets, say for example, like a police officer is on the other side of Middleton, have to charge up really quickly, then that's an issue to it to rage. So like seeing the hybrid option, and I also do appreciate the idea of waiting a little bit, because one of the things about electric that does bother me a little bit is when the electric car dies, you have to dispose of that battery. and that's a lot of waste. And you know, we can go back and forth all day about which one is worse, but that's something else that we want to take into consideration of when we're done with our electric vehicle, how are we disposing of them? So yeah, that's my 2 cents, but with what you displayed, I think that's pretty solid.
Okay. Tom? No comments. Okay. Kathleen?
I think Tom's trying to talk, but he's muted.
Geez, I'm muted. Sorry. Yeah, I don't have any. I don't feel qualified or well versed to make any recommendations. So I think you're right that I don't see why we would need to vote on it because we don't have that expertise.
Back to
My-
Kathleen. Oh, sorry.
I agree. I appreciate this information, but I'm not sure that I understand the full perspective here. And I'm not sure my vote is worth going in one direction because I think it's from lack of knowledge. So, I mean, everything you've presented has been great. I feel like this is a larger conversation. I think at least saying you've presented the information and we'd like to stay aware of all of the decisions that are being made would be important, but I feel like there's more to this story than we're even exploring based on other people's comments.
So unless someone has strong feelings, Chief, I'd say that you can go back and in good faith say you raised it with the committee and that we discussed it and we're passing it on without recommendation one way or the other. We're just kind of here. And fundamentally, it's an operational decision. Just like I wouldn't get involved if you're going to use a baton or a bolo, although I like the bolos. That's your call. So this is you running your shop there. So I think that's as far as I'm comfortable going. So unless I hear an objection from one of my committee members, let's move on.
Thank you. That's very helpful. I appreciate all the comments.
All right, I think we're up to mental health. We're talking about what's going on with Miramont and what is our policy.
Yep, and Cornell, I believe you raised this at our last meeting, just kind of looking for a little bit of an overview of our mental health response. I provided all of you with our mental health policy, and also kind of a side note here, if you're ever looking for a policy, we have the vast majority, if not all of them, on our website. The policy I provided you is what is on our website. You'll see that there are some things that are redacted, personal numbers for individuals that we contact for a mental health type call. But any policy that you're looking for, including this one, is on our department website. So I'll kind of give you an overview of our mental health response. Cornell, if you have any other questions, any other committee members, please feel free to ask. So as you've heard from me many times, mental health calls for service, and even what you saw tonight with our use of force incidents is a pretty regular call for service for us. Over the last couple of years, I'd say on average, we're on, some days we'll have 2 or 3 mental health calls and we won't have some for a few days. On an average, we probably get 1 mental health call per day. And so it's a major driver of calls for service for us. One of the things that we always try to do when we have a mental health call is really to resolve it with the least restrictive way possible and trying to get that individual help, whether that's contacting family, whether that's maybe connecting them with a service provider that they've been in contact with before, might be transporting them to a hospital on a voluntary basis. And as a last resort, if need be, if they meet the criteria, we would take them into protective custody, where we're authorized by state statute, which is 5115, to take somebody into a protective custody for emergency detention. But again, that is a last resort. That's the last thing we want to do. We really try to help these individuals, connect them with the appropriate services, try to get them to voluntarily go to the hospital, to get to see somebody, to check themselves in, and to get the needed treatment. And every one of these cases, we reach out to what is called Journey Mental Health. It's also called Crisis. Kind of has that name. That's what people are in Dane County kind of know them by as Crisis. But they're mental health professionals. So every single time that we get a mental health call, we don't do this alone. We consult with a professional. That's sometimes by phone, sometimes they'll actually come to the scene. That's not as frequent as it used to be because they're so busy in Dane County, but we consult with them and they help us come up with a plan for that individual. Sometimes that means that the crisis worker just talks to that individual on the phone and they develop a safety plan, and the crisis worker will call back the next day to check on them. It might be setting up a plan that they go see their primary physician the next day. So there's a wide variety of different routes that we can go with these cases. But again, the last resort that we want is to take them into protective custody and to do an emergency detention on them. If you go through the form a little bit, I don't know how closely anybody looked at the policy, but to be eligible for an emergency detention, again, the last resort is the individual must be a danger to themselves, and that includes recent threats or an attempt at suicide or serious bodily harm. A substantial probability of physical impairment or injury to self or to another individual due to impairment judgment demonstrated by recent acts or omissions. Or the last one is self-care issues and refusal to take medication. We see those cases more with kind of elderly individuals who just aren't taking proper care of themselves. They're not eating, they're not taking their medication, and then we'll take them into protective custody so we can take them to a local hospital or to even Winnebago to where they'd receive treatment. And lastly, if an individual is impaired by alcohol or drugs, we do have what we call a detox center in the city of Monona where we take them. And even when we take them to detox, we contact crisis, and crisis will contact that individual before they're released and when they sober up to talk to them to see if they're really suicidal, see if they have thoughts of harming themselves or others. And then if so, they'll develop plans to kind of provide them with some treatment for mental health. So that's a real quick overview of our mental health calls and our responses. Cornell or others, any questions about that? Any questions about our policy?
I guess one of the questions I do have is, and I guess I'll find out what the back of a police car looks like this Friday, because I'm doing a ride along. But when you transport them, are you transporting them in the back of the patrol officer's car? And if someone's in like some kind of mental distress, is the back of those cars the best like psychological place to put them?
Great questions, Cornell, and things that we've been concerned about for a number of years. The reason why, again, law enforcement should not be involved in mental health calls. So yes, they're transported in the back of our squad cars for safety for themselves. It's also our policy that if we're transporting somebody, they need to be in the back of our squad car. And then you're right, that's been concerns of law enforcement for a number of years, is when somebody's going through a mental health crisis, the last thing that we should be doing is to be putting them in the back of a police car in handcuffs. And in many cases, the only place we can take them is Winnebago. So we transport them hours away from family and support systems so they can get the mental health treatment, which is great. But we're transporting them in the back of a squad car multiple hours away to get them that treatment. We can do better, and law enforcement has been preaching this and trying to get changes locally and throughout the state to make some changes so people can get treatment here in Dane County. We do have Marymount's, which we've discussed previously. That is an option, but still the number one place where we need to transport people based on the recommendations of crisis is Winnebago, and that is pretty common throughout the state of Wisconsin. Is that is one of the very few facilities that will take somebody in mental health crisis.
So we're not there yet with Miramont. I mean, is there ongoing discussion to get us where we can go there? Or is that a ways away?
I think that's a ways away. Right now with the transition, new acquisition of the company, I think I brought that up at our last meeting. I don't remember the name of the new company that took over.
Yeah.
There's a lot of transition there, and I think there's a lot of growing pains that Captain Kukuski has done a great job of being in communication with them, providing some guidelines, some protocols that they hopefully will implement to lessen some of the issues that we've encountered. But as we discussed last time, we're still having to deal with a number of calls at that facility. In fact, a couple of days ago, there was an individual who was acting out from outside of Dane County at their facility. They ended up checking in at the facility, was acting out. We got called there, and we ended up, Travis helped me out, I think 20 hours later on that call, we spent with that individual at the hospital. And I think they eventually admitted that individual to a local hospital, correct, Travis? But 20 hours later.
It was just shy of 20 hours. So there's an officer sitting with that person for that entire length of time down at UW Hospital, I believe. Ultimately, he was admitted to UW Hospital.
So those are some of the growing pains that we're dealing with Marymount right now. Again, they're trying a lot of new staff who's not worked with mental health patients before, new ownership. They're trying to fill beds. A lot of growing pains that we're dealing with, and hopefully as they get a more stable crew of employees and get more familiar with dealing with mental health individuals, some of those issues hopefully will lessen and we will have less calls for service at that facility.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Cornell, did I kind of answer some of the questions you had regarding our mental health response?
Yeah, and I'm fairly comfortable with with your guys' guidelines with the response. Where my brain is going at, because of the conversation of public safety, is there, I'm trying to think as a collective, as a community, and something that we could put out there that we can do to kind of help it get to a point where we may not have to call the police, where there's a neighbor or someone can catch warning signs a little sooner, like the use of force, for example. Guy was cognizant enough to realize, I'm going to hurt somebody, I should call the police and I should be detained. And being intoxicated, they of course couldn't go through that route the proper way, so they got aggressive with the cops, and then it escalated to use of force. And that's where my brain is at right now. It's like, what could we do to help prevent people from being in a very uncomfortable ride in the back of the squad car versus being able to be in a comfortable family member's car going to these facilities instead? Is where is right now where my mind is at.
Cornell, those are all comments that I think law enforcement has been struggling with for a long time. Our mental health system is broken right now, and we need to a complete overhaul, because again, an issue that is falling on law enforcement's shoulders to deal with. This was not something that I was dealing with frequently 28 years ago when I got in law enforcement, but it's a daily thing for my staff now. It's so daily that we spend a great deal of time on them, and our staff goes to 40 hours of training and crisis intervention training just to be able to better understand somebody who's going through a mental health crisis. So all those comments you made are spot on, and comments that we've been struggling with in law enforcement for a long time. But if you come up with some great ideas, we're open for them, because we should not have to transport somebody in the back of a squad car in handcuffs hours away for a mental health crisis, and that's our only option right now. And I'm disappointed that the state and others have not found a way to deal with that in a better way than what we've been doing for the last probably 10, 12 years.
Is that, what was the name of the group you guys call?
That's crisis.
Crisis. Is that a public number?
Yep, people call that. So in fact, sometimes crisis will call us to have us go check on somebody who they had a conversation with, who maybe made some really concerning comments about self-harm, and then they'll actually ask us to go check on them on their behalf. So that is a public number. A lot of individuals call when they're feeling down, and then there's others that, they'll call 911 because they know that we'll respond, or maybe they dealt with our staff before. Maybe they lack transportation to the hospital. They don't have the funds or a way to get to the hospital for voluntary admittance, but they know that the ambulance or the police department will transport them there. But yes, that is a public number.
Okay. That may be, that's the type of thing, Cordell, I think we're talking about is, how do we find other resources other than 911, or maybe, I don't know if 911 can tap us in there, but yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why I brought it up. Because since I've been doing the Citizen Academy, I've been picking up a lot more information, and some of that is technically all public knowledge, but it's getting it to the public that's what's really important. because if you don't know it's there, like how we were talking about like the outreach, I found out like 2 weeks ago that technically every citizen could actually request a ride-along. I never knew that you could do that. And that's a way to get FaceTime with an officer and get rid of that, the stigma, because every time I see an officer, they're either on patrol or I never see an officer standing around here in Middleton. But I never understood how to approach an officer as a child. Can I say hi to a cop? Can I walk up to them and everything like that? And those are those little small things that will change the way public perception is, because my public perception of the cops is I got read the riot act about how to handle a cop when I got pulled over when I first got my license. And so, yes sir, no sir, hands on the wheel. If you move your hand, you make sure you tell them where you're going. And I think that would help. And I met Tom, and Tom is a great guy. And I'm happy that he's going back to be doing community outreach stuff. But I think it's that little extra bit of community outreach that people know that you can interact with the police officers, and it does have to be an emergency all the time, or when you lock yourself out the car and they have to break your window kind of scenario, that they're here to help. Not, I was talking to renting about someone before. I want to be able to think of cops as to preserve the peace, not enforce the law. Got a statement of enforcement, kind of scary, Yeah, there's my soapbox for the night.
That's it. No, it's great. Here. Oh. All right.
That was some profound stuff. I liked it, Cornell. That was kind of fun. We rarely get out there on our discussions. We kind of follow the stats and we thank our police officers, but I'm glad that you're bringing us back to our roots. How do we do that community outreach? How are we making sure that the next generation feels comfortable, not just, the people on the streets today feeling comfortable reaching out? It's something I'm always thinking about because I grew up in St. Louis. The chief knows that. In St. Louis, it's safe to walk up to a police officer, but we are not encouraged to ever do it. And in fact, we fear, the police. And as someone who is, sorry, that's my alarm. That's the children have to go off iPad alarm. Sorry. So, but, growing up as a white woman, I was afraid of our police. And I can say that because it's not Middleton and I'm not criticizing our police here. But it's just, people didn't understand until they saw Ferguson on national news why I had issues with the police. And I would say to them, unfortunately, St. Louis has a history of doing this to all of their citizens. And so, but we know, being on the south side, that's where the white people tend to live, that our sisters and brothers on the north side, which is closer to Ferguson, it's tougher. It's not easier and it's not the same. And so for people of color, that is hard. They are taught from the beginning to be afraid. And so, and the same thing when I lived in Chicago and other cities. And so one of the things I talked about when I came on public safety, my first year is, and I talked to the prior chief and I said, since Middleton has grown so much, I want to say it's like over 50% in the last 20 years. People are moving from other cities, whether it's Chicago or Milwaukee or St. Louis like me. If they don't have a culture of community policing in those cities, they're not going to automatically trust the police. They didn't grow up with the Middleton police force, or maybe they had one bad incident sometime, 15 years ago, and that's what they carry with them. And so as we welcome more people to the community, which is just always happening, especially with these buildings, we can't assume that they just know that it's okay to walk up and say hi. So one of the things that I really, really love seeing as a city councilwoman is the Popsicle Day. I know that in summer when it's really hot, the police go out to the parks and hand out popsicles. And I'm like, this is the coolest thing ever. It probably costs $5 for a box of popsicles. But man, as a kid, if someone walked up to me and they're like, hey, it's a popsicle, I would have been like, coolest person ever. It is 105 out. So I think that's like the beautiful thing about this community is they're finding small ways to make those interactions, but I would love to see more. The peace officer, I don't know if we'll go in that direction, and I'm kind of giggling because I'm like, I think that would have to be like an act of the council or the state or something, but I love the idea of it. And I think we do it, and I think it's the approach is there. I don't know if we can do it. And the police chief is probably like, but I like being the police chief, so there's probably. But, I want to say, I love that we're exploring this topic because it is so heavy, nationally and in our own lives. But the meaning of it is so important. And Cornell, you're just going to have to keep pushing me, because if I'm on council, then I need to be saying, I have to be thoughtful, and, I have to be ready to act so that we are always in the peacekeeping role when we can be. And that's ensuring that we're getting financed and budgeted for our police officers, that we're staffed right. If we need to work more on mental health, which it sounds like is there, then maybe that's something we need to talk about it at the finance time. And that piece to make sure that they have the services available or they can connect. I know there was some, I want to say there were some pilots out west to have a social worker ride along, or, and I think the sheriff's department was having an app to have social workers be able to talk, or considering an app. So there might be some things out there, but I think going forward, I have to keep your thoughts in mind when I sit at the table at finance and see what we can do to help ensure that our police officers can remain in that role of doing popsicle days and being approachable and getting out to community things, just like Tom was talking about earlier, and finding a way to work on that mental health piece. So I'm going to take that one for the team, and I'm going to carry that one forward.
All right. Any other comments? I mean, this is what we're here for, right? And how we move through, and we got the referendum coming up, but how we allocate resources, where we focus, how we do things, but good stuff. All right. Well, one of the things we were asked about is the school resource officer program, which is a fantastic segue. What we've been talking about of building that relationship with the community. And do we have two in the high school now, or is there just a transition going on?
Just a transition. So Officer Kim Wood is taking over for Officer Kenneth Chung, who is leaving the Middleton Police Department. He was actually hired by Madison Police Department, so he'll be leaving us at the end of May. And Officer Kim.
Oh, man. All right.
So we have Officer Kim Wood at the high school starting next year, and then we have Officer Julie Carbon, who is our community SRO position. I think Kathleen, you asked kind of an update on this at our last committee meeting. So overall, it's going very well. The community SRO position has been well received. The officers getting to all the elementary schools, still at the Creamery, not full time, but they're also actually supplementing at the high school when need be, because that is a pretty busy position. In addition to what we've done in the past, we have our criminal justice club up and running at the Middleton High School. I think we had 50 students sign up for that. They're meeting on a monthly basis. I'm hearing that's going very well. We also started, we are one of two departments. I think there might be a third one now in Dane County, but we're part of the YWCA Youth Restorative Justice program. So that is another opportunity or another resource for our staff, that if they have a situation at the high school or any of the schools where they feel like a restorative justice model is more appropriate than going through municipal court or through a Dane County juvenile court, they can refer a juvenile to this restorative justice program. They actually meet at the Middleton Library and they go through the restorative justice program. So we are the second department to join this restorative justice program. Madison was the first, and I believe Monona was looking to get on board too. So this year we've already referred 9 cases to the restorative justice program, with the vast majority of these cases coming from incidents at the high school. So overall, incidents, Karomri had 45 incidents this school year, resulting in 1 citation to a student, so that'd be a municipal citation. And then the Middleton High Schools had 111 incidents for this school year, resulting in 2 citations and 8 referrals. And these referrals, when you look at the cases, are significant batteries, so fights that happen at the school, some sexual assault investigations, some weapon offenses. So out of the 111 incidents, only 10 have resulted in some type of referral or a citation, which is a pretty small number. And just looking at some of the stats, we've been in over 30 classrooms at the Middleton High School. So talking on a variety of topics from Fourth Amendment to sexual assault to drug use, you name it, our SROs get requested by the staff at the high school, and we go into those classrooms and we present on a variety of topics. So overall, I think it's been all the changes, the things we implemented from the comprehensive review have been well received. And we're still building those relationships like we have for the past 35 years with students. And I think I mentioned this before, I have students still contacting me. I had one call me a month ago and just to tell me and thank me, tell me what they're doing in life and thank me for what I did for that individual 20 some years ago. And lastly, I'm currently working with the high school on a criminal justice pathway program. This is for students who are interested in a career in criminal justice. And if they meet all the requirements, take the required classes, have the acceptable grades, their final year of their senior year, so their second semester, they'd be able to do some type of partnership with the Middleton Police Department. And we're trying to work that out right now with the school, but that's maybe becoming an intern. It could be doing ride-alongs. It could be part of our Citizens Academy. It could be becoming a volunteer and policing member. We're kind of working out those details, but this is another way to kind of grow our own and connect with our community and with our youth for those individuals looking to get into a criminal justice field in the future. But working out those finer details. I'm told that the first group of students that would be eligible would be the ones that are currently sophomores. So they'd have an opportunity to take this criminal justice pathway their junior year and senior year, and then they'd be able to participate and partner with the Middleton Police Department their second semester of their senior year. Kathleen, any other questions about the SRO program?
No, this is good. I know that funding is coming from the city and the school district. Is that still true?
That's correct. So I get it sometimes confused. Captain Geyser, it's at 50% of the officer's salary is paid for the 10 months that they're in the school by the school district. Is that correct?
Okay.
That is correct, yes.
Okay.
Adds up to about $90,000.
And I think this came up and something I wanted to hear about because we've kind of ebbed and flowed in terms of the way people respond in the schools about SROs. And I know we had sort of a moment, let's say a year ago, maybe 18 months ago, where there was, that was in the city council, right? That wasn't at the school district level, right? That there was some sort of public comment that dominated one of the meetings. I think it was in the summer. I'm going to say during COVID, because I remember being at my desk when we discussed it in the house. So it wasn't in person. I just think it's good to keep talking about it. I think it's a positive program, but there's also some sort of backlash from the community sometimes about the value. And so I think talking about the interest and participation for the Criminal Justice Club is important. And this pathway will be an interesting way to sort of talk about the partnership between the department and the schools. I'm saying all of this, and I have like 3 kids sitting in the kitchen listening to me talk about this that are all either at the high school or at Karomri. So Who, oh, no, you don't need to come. Sorry. Okay, I'm sorry, everyone. There's an 8th grader. Okay, there she's gone.
Yeah.
Anyway, so my interest is partially because I know our kids are impacted by having them in the building, and it's a positive. But it's just good to hear that it's sort of having some good space right now. I think it was challenging 18 months ago when we were having those conversations. So anything we can do, well, I should say, I'm very supportive of this, whatever you need. I don't want to speak for the committee, I'm sorry, but I know that it's gone in waves, so.
Yep.
Thank you, Kathleen. And yeah, your memory serves you correctly. That was about 18 months ago, and it was at a council meeting. The school district was very much in favor of our SRO program, but council received a lot of feedback from some community members about SROs in schools. One of my biggest complaints about those complaints is it was not directed towards our program. It was more of a national narrative. And I asked repeatedly during those conversations is what's wrong with our SRO program? Because I'm willing to make those changes if somebody can tell me what's wrong with our SRO program, and nobody could. That I am very passionate about our SRO program. When we talk about community policing at its core, this is the #1 community policing program in the Middleton Police Department. We build more relationships with our youth at our schools than any other program that we do. I know the relationships I built at that school. Travis and Jeremy were both SROs. They can tell you a bunch of stories too. We are building those relationships that people are asking us to do. So I am very passionate about our SRO program. I'm so happy that they're back in place, and we'll continue to make a huge difference in our community as we have those officers in the school.
I'll point out, it's not just for the benefit of the kids in the community that way, it's the benefit of the officers. Because now you're really rooted in the community and see the people coming up. And I know every time I've mentored kids, I follow them forever because it's like, they're like kids. I mean, they're your kids. Like it's this incredible feeling. So yeah, Kathleen, like you, I'm also a big fan. So cool. All right, any other discussion on the SRO? Oh, let's touch on this every 6 months or so. We can kind of remember to just kind of keep it as a recurring every other kind of agenda item, I think would be nice. Since it was a hot button.
Yeah, absolutely, we can put that.
Cool. And then Tom, did you see the commotion you have caused in bicycle licensing? You're causing laws to be stricken left and right. You've got what's his name? George Zen's writing about it. So where are we on it though?
That was my good job. That was changed.
So the update I got from the city employee chair of the Pedestrian, Bicycle, and Transit Committee was that they met, I think it was in mid-March, and they endorsed the idea of changing the ordinance as to no longer require licensing of bicycles in the city of Middleton. I've not received any other details or information on that, but I believe, Tom, that is kind of what your request was, is to make it no longer a requirement to license a bicycle in the city.
I didn't have an opinion.
Yeah. You want to do a victory lap, Tom? Do you want to?
Well, I don't really, I really still don't know why some cities have discontinued it and others are continuing it. I really don't know if there's a benefit or not. I didn't know about the response from the bike committee person who made that recommendation until just this moment. I guess I need to be paying more attention, but I guess I think that there's not anything urgent about taking a position on this. And this is new information, and I think I'd like some time to chew on what I just learned tonight and talk about it again next month. Is that possible? Or do
I think we need it's off with licensing now, so they'll pull it from the regular or the ordinances or not. I mean, that's where it is.
Captain
Okay.
Geiser,
We referred it up.
All right.
Captain
I
Geiser.
didn't have a position. I just wanted to better understand whether we should or shouldn't and why. You know, I would think we want to encourage people to register their bikes, but I don't think we should have a fine. I would
Well,
think
I
that it
think-
would be, I know that I've lost a bike and that was recently purchased and I couldn't get the serial number. And if I was encouraged to register my bike, I would have the information I need when it disappears. And I would think that might also be valuable when a child and a bike disappear. But I don't know. I mean, I haven't researched it, other than the fact that I know that Madison, during the COVID thing, stopped registering bikes and was recommending that people go to some national registry. And maybe we should be doing that, recommending that people go to a particular place to register their bikes. But I would think it would be important to have some kind of bicycle registry at some level, whether it be a national registry or a municipal registry or a state registry. I would think that there would be some benefit to having that. Are we going to not register bikes at all? Are we going to discontinue? Yeah, I did mine online, and I did lose a bike 15 years ago where I wasn't able to. I mean, I think I was actually said, if I don't know the serial number, you guys weren't interested in it, and so I had a bike that disappeared, and there's no record. There's no police record taken. So I don't know. I'm confused still, and I'm not recommending. I don't have an opinion about what the best route to go is. That's all.
Oh, okay. Well,
Does that make sense?
it does, but not from where we were 2 meetings ago. So we've moved on with what
Okay.
we were doing. And I guess if you think it's something we should have a referral to a national registration or something, do the research, and I'm sure it's something we can put in the database or suggest the city or police have in their database to refer people to. But yeah, okay. This
Should we
was really
ditto what
just a
makes-
follow-up.
Does the chief think we should ditto what Madison's doing, or?
Tom, I really don't have an opinion on it. Whatever is recommended by this committee or by the PED committee, I'm in favor of. I guess my question for Captain Geisler, as he chairs the L&O committee, has this made it to the agenda, or have you seen a referral, or does a referral need to be made from this committee?
The referral should come from PED. I think it came from here to PED. PED would take it to license and ordinance. License and ordinance would take it to council, and council would have the final say in any ordinance change. But to answer your question, I have not seen anything yet. No.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so let's talk about future agenda items. We've got the one we put on which was outreach, just kind of talking about that coming out of COVID, new officers, just kind of an update on where we are with all that. I think would be nice, and then spend some time talking about things we've seen and enjoy and like to see again, or I don't know, just have a discussion about this, improving the public persona, if you will, or just I really like how Emily phrased it, like people not from Middleton may not understand we have a pretty awesome setup here, and we're always trying to improve it, but how do we keep that going? Any other agenda items people would like to see for next time? Okay, you have time to email the chief. We've got about 6 weeks, I think, before it starts getting put down. I do want to talk about this, though. I just shared it on with the police's Facebook, and then here's a link. Tom Wilson, since we're talking about him a lot, he helped introduce me to the Middleton Fire Department when we were trying to do some stuff with the Boy Scouts of America. And then he and 2 firefighters went to a big training we did with the council. So I think we had 80 to 90 scouts attending a big training on first aid and trauma and accidents and search and rescue called the Trauma Rama Ori. And we're there doing search and rescue and drones and how to approach the scene. And we're fantastic. People loved these guys. And it was really nice for us having professionals there and not just dads who try hard, but people who actually do this for a living there talking to the kids. It was a great event. So Chief, Tom did great. I'm getting all kinds of positive feedback, and we thank you. And thank him. So
Thanks, Bartlett. And I'll make sure that gets passed on to Tom.
we have other things being passed. We still owe him thank yous, but yeah, I didn't get to go, which was devastating for me, but I had this other thing. But yeah, the reports I'm getting back was just fabulous event. So all right, well, with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Could I ask, are we no longer, a couple of months ago, we actually set the date for the next meeting at the meeting. Are we no longer going to do that?
I think we need to do that Google poll, especially without Rebecca here. So putting out the
Okay.
Google poll when we hit about a quarter out, and that gives us several options. That seems to work
Oh.
best.
Well, it works best for you. It doesn't work best for me, but it's easier for me to set a date aside now rather than be committed for something else. And
Well,
but-
we're on Monday.
Yeah.
We're on Monday nights, so you can go out about 2 months and then give yourself some wiggle room and pencil it in. Chief, maybe to, respond to Tom, maybe in about a month, look ahead and do a Google poll that far out. But I just know that having the different people look at calendars, we just need to, that's the best way I've ever seen to do it. All right. But fair point, Tom. So we'll try to get it done earlier so you can mark it on your calendar to make that time. I would like to entertain a motion to adjourn. Kathleen, I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn from you.
Can I just say so moved? Can we
Okay.
adjourn?
All right, Emily's got a second. All right. Any last comments? Let's get out of here. Good night. Good meeting, folks. Thank you very much.
See you, everybody. Have a good night.